PowerPoint, yes.
Okay, okay. All right. So I'm gonna continue where I left off yesterday. Yesterday. Okay, so today we will be talking about how do we develop a meal plan. All right. All right. So in developing the meal plan, though, as we said, that's how we determine how we do our calorie intake, and calories the same as we mentioned yesterday as our energy needs. All right. And we did say that when we have too much calories, the body store it as fat. All right. And when we have too much sugar, that the body would have actually stored it as glycogen. And when we are low on sugar, then the body would actually pull it from the liver cells so we can get some energy. All right. So how we go about our dietary plan now, we actually have to determine the amount of calorie or the amount of energy that is needed by the client. And that would be dependent on the patient's weight, right? So nutritionists look a lot on the weight of the patient to determine what are their calorie needs, right? So when we go to the dietitian, sometimes, even though we have like a diet sheet, sometimes it's not really a one size fits all, because the dietitian really looks at the weight of the patient, right? Sometimes they have to think about their age as well. As you know, an elderly would have actually required less, being that they would have actually had a decrease in taste buds and a whole lot of different things that they would need. Also with elderly, once you get older, your gastrointestinal tract, there is actually a decline there. So you don't eat as much as you would as a younger person, because the phases of your digestive system would have actually been slowing down. All right. So as we mentioned now, you would actually assess the current food intake and your eating pattern, and you use a 24-hour recall. So now what the 24-hour recall is that you would have actually been looking back for all the meals that you would have consumed for the 24-hour period. All right. So that you can jot down to see what you would have consumed. And that too, when we are actually doing surveillance, if we're trying to assess, like, for instance, a disease outbreak, that is what we would use. Because sometimes the patient will present with diarrhea and they don't know what is the cause. Sometimes we can ask them to do a 24-hour recall to see, what were the last meal that they had and where do they have the meal. Because sometimes if all the meals are eaten at a particular place, then this can actually help us to ascertain that, okay, there may be an outbreak, or maybe that we need to, assess the staff in the canteen to see if they are actually maintaining the standards based on public health principles. All right, so it says you categorize usual food intake into exchange amounts based on portions and the food consumed at each meals and snack. And you use the exchange amount for each food items, all right, into translate into calories. So it depends on whatever food that you have, you basically transfer it by the amount of calories. So the amount of kilocalories will tell you if that you're exceeding your amount of daily calories, right? And as we mentioned yesterday, that you need 1,800, that is the basic for most persons. However, it can be less or more depending on the weight of the patient or whatever premorbid condition the patient has, whether it be diabetes, cancer, whether the person had certain gut surgery of the gastrointestinal tract, or if the person has cancer. All of those things we have to take into account. All right. Now, this is a table, and it is saying the following. This is just an example. So it says that you estimate daily energy needs based on the actual weight. Now, if you look at somebody who is obese or inactive, this is somebody, as we spoke about yesterday, that is not doing much exercise, right? Or these are chronic dieters, that these are people that just eat, or a lot of fast food. Now, we would want this person to have 20 kilocal, right? Because this person is already having a lot of fat on board based on the fact that they are obese. So you would now have to limit the amount of kilocal, right, per kilogram, right? So it's based on the body weight. This is per kilogram. That's how you would measure it. Now for the person over 55 years, right? If you're active, now meaning that you're active, so you would be burning calories than a regular inactive obese person, right? Or if you're a sedentary man. So those are sedentary lifestyle. For instance, say for instance, a taxi driver and stuff, that again is not actually doing much exercise, but an active woman and somebody over 55, you would actually consume now 25 kilocalories per kilogram. If it's an active man, say for instance, a athlete, or somebody say has a job who is actually using up a lot of energy, for instance, a construction worker or so on, or a very active woman, those persons would need about 30 kilocal per kg. All right. And we know that in weight, sometimes we use pounds or we'll use kilograms. And to convert from kilograms to pound, if you have 125 pound, you would divide it by 2.2, which is the standard, to get the amount of kilogram that is required. All right. And for very thin, remember what we talk about, very thin or very active men, persons, they would need more kilocal per kg. Now, remember that when you're very active.
Or someone is asking, what are kilocalories? They don't know what is.
All right. The kilocalories is the kilograms per calorie. All right. So the calories are actually in kilograms. So that is why you're looking now at your weight in kilograms as well. And that's why I said to you, it would be easier to convert the person's weight from pounds to kilograms. So you would actually be better able to work out the portion size. So the kilocal is basically the kilograms per calories. The calories are actually translated into kilograms. And so they put the weight into kilograms. So you're able easier to work it out. So you would have like conversion, right? That you were calculating. So you would put the kilograms per calorie over the kilograms, but you would have to work out the weight in kilograms. But I'm saying that all the time, you don't normally have the weight in kilograms. So to convert, if the person is 200 pounds, in order to know how much is their kilograms they weigh, you would have to divide that 200 pounds by 2.2, and then you would get how much kilograms they weigh. And the kilograms is usually less than the amount in pounds, because you would be dividing it by 2.2. So that is all it is. It's just the what should I say now? Oh my gosh, what's the word I'm looking for?
Method?
No,
The method is
it's not the method. Like you have grams, kilograms. I'm so tired, I don't remember. The way the measurement, right? The measurement. So whether it's grams, whether it's kilograms, so it's the unit of measurement, right? That's the word I'm looking for.
Oh yeah, unit. Somebody said unit.
Right, unit of measurement, yeah. All right. So the second phase of how we would do that, you would actually determine the caloric prescription based on, as I said, that's before, the age, the gender, the height, the weight, and the activity level. And if you notice that sometimes persons who are very tall, those persons tend to weigh a lot. So you can have somebody who is tall and they're slim, but they do weigh a lot because their height makes up for the weight. All right, so it said the needs of clients differ. There is therefore the need to conduct individual assessment to determine the energy requirements. And remember, I just explained that it's not one size fits all. So all of these things, the age, the weight, the gender, the height, the dietitian would basically have to assess the person based on that to determine what energy needs the person would require. And it says energy requirements are based on the age, gender, weight, and activity level. Different methods can be used to calculate energy requirement for adults. And that is where the dietitian would come in, or the nutritionist, more than likely dietitians. All right, so based on the food exchange list, it is saying that the basic premise of exchange system is that food are grouped together with other foods or similar nutrient compositions so that each list can be substituted or exchanged with other foods on the scale or the list. So this is similar to what we were talking about yesterday when we spoke about the multi-mix principles, right? So we would know then if we can eliminate a particular food, because just like I mentioned, you would probably have the rice and you may have green peas, right? Which is actually another starchy vegetables. So you're actually consuming double starch. So this was kind of help you to decide what you need to substitute, right? So instead of butter, what can I use instead of the butter, and so on. So you don't basically duplicate the same type of foods, right, in the same meal, because that would actually cause to be actually increasing too many calories based on that diet, and that too can have its effect. All right, so it is saying now within each food list, one exchange in the serving size described, so that's the measure, is approximately equal to another in calories. And these are the bases that we look on: the carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Now, if you remember yesterday when we spoke about these nutrients, and why we remember them, these are the macronutrients, right? These are larger, so you need these in a larger portion than you would need the vitamins and the minerals. So it says the exchange list should be used in consultation with a nutrition professional who would individualize the treatment plan after reviewing the nutrition and the health history and calculate the appropriate amount of calories and carbohydrates. And remember, I spoke about this. So I'm saying if the person has, for instance, they did a surgery say they had cancer of the bowel or colon cancer. At some point in time, when we're actually graduating back the feeds to this person to start taking meals orally again. Now, sometimes they will be having a tube for a while until we start putting them back on oral meals. Not everybody do get a tube, right? But some persons, we have to give them like TPN, so those are intravenous feeds. So they get, let's call it total parental nutrition. So all the nutrition is basically in liquid form, all right? So the fat is in liquid form, the protein is in liquid form, right? And the carbohydrates, which is in the form of glucose is in liquid form, all right? But that is depending on the type of surgery that is done. So usually when we have persons who are sick, the dietitian really have to come in and look through the docket to see what is the health history of the person, whether the person had a form of cancer, whether they had diabetes, hypertension, whatever the disease condition they have to look at all of those to determine what is the diet sheet this person is going to get. And that is why, yes, even though you can basically use a base diet sheet to see what calories you need to consume, that may not be accurate for everybody. Because if you have somebody who is not actually, say everybody's a diabetic, it still may vary depending on the weight of the person, right? The sex of the person and the age of the person. So all of these, the nutrition you have to look at to make the dietary plan. And it says now, the list should be used in consultation. I think this is actually a repetition. All right. So the list in this appendix is divided into, and we mentioned about carbohydrates, right? Which includes staple foods. And we do know what staple foods are, like your bread, right? Your flour, all of those are staple foods. And you do have some vegetable, which we mentioned, the corn and the green peas, because those are actually carbohydrates based. So those are staple foods. And certain fruits. If you notice, when you eat certain fruits, you can actually taste the starchy ness to it. Not some of them that are actually citrus, but some of the others, for example, the foreign apples, and so that would actually have some amount of starch to it as well. So it says food from the list can be interchanged into a meal plan since each group contains roughly equal amount of calories and carbohydrates. So now for the meat and the meat substitute, now this would have been protein, right? So this groups, as it said, sources of proteins from legumes and nuts, right? Now the legumes and nuts, remember we mentioned now that persons who don't eat meat, right? They can have their peas and their beans, right? So that the peas and the beans can actually be their source of protein. It's just that sometimes now they would have to look on the amount that they are consuming based to determine the portion that they need to have. All right, and then the fat group now, which includes familiar fatty sources, and is it divided into the list of saturated and unsaturated fats. And remember yesterday we mentioned that the Saturated fats are the fats that are very unhealthy, right? Because those add to your cholesterol levels, right? And the amount of fatty foods that will actually block the arteries. And we did mention that the unsaturated fat is actually broken down into monosaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats. And those are the healthier fats that you need to have. Those are better for cardiovascular health and helps to prevent heart disease and heart attack. All right, so for the staple foods, all right, and this, as I mentioned, was actually inclusive of bread, rice, cereals, and this is saying substitutes. So if you're having, say, toast bread, are you having it sliced or chopped? This is the amount that you really should have. So sometimes person having 4 slices of bread, right? But if you notice what they're telling you, the measure that you look at, it is actually giving you an idea of the amount that you need to take. All right. They're telling you now, if you have the homemade toast bread, right, you can actually have a thin slice, and same for the hard-dough bread, a thin slice. As you know, some persons have this fat chunk of bread, and for persons who are diabetics, you know, the white bread has a lot of carbohydrates to it, which is why we encourage the whole wheat bread, you know, which has a reduction in the amount of carbohydrates. Now your bami, it is telling you that you have a quarter size, right, which is basically 15 centimeters in diameter, right? And diameter because it is circular, or you can have 1.5 centimeter thick. Your hamburger bun now. Now, when we eat a large Whopper, so we see how we're actually damaging ourselves and overeating, because if you're having a hamburger, you're supposed to be having a half medium size, right? Because remember, when you're eating, you know, it's not that you should have like a large meal. It should be small, frequent meals. So you can eat small amounts, but frequently, probably like every 4 to 6 hours. Instead of you have a big breakfast and you're eating 4 or 5 dumplings, 3 pieces of yam, 2 bananas, pumpkin, that's too many starch you're consuming there. So what you could do, you can have 1 banana, 1 piece of yam, right? And if you want, you can have a dumpling. Because if you notice, yam is very high in starch. If you're having, for persons who are diabetic, it's always better to have your sweet potato than to have the Irish potato. The Irish potato is very high in starch. If you notice, when you boil that Irish potato and you look at the water, oh, the water is white, that's all starch there that you're looking at. So even though the sweet potato is sweet, it is safer to eat than the Irish potato. Now, the hot dog roll, it is saying that 1 small one is adequate, right? If you're having biscuits, and this is saying water type, so I'm assuming they're talking about the crackers, you only need about 6. So if you're eating 1 pack of crackers, you're consuming too many carbohydrates. And same here at the hospital where I work, I notice when they're actually providing the diabetic supper, they will send like probably about probably 6 crackers, and they put like some sardine or whatever the protein is in a separate container, but they're not sending them a pack of crackers each. And even though it would have been probably costly for the institution, but they still have to speak about the person's health. And so sometimes here when we prepare the food, we at my hospital, we don't allow food to come in from the outside. So you have to eat what is provided. And so sometimes they will tell you that the food is fresh, because what we do, we have a diet sheet. So the nurses write up the diet sheets, and based on the personal condition, whether they're hypertensive, if they're hypertensive, we will request a low salt diet. If they are renal, we write renal diet. So they know what they need to put in it. Because we do know too that persons with renal failure, they're not supposed to be consuming too much protein. All right, and we continue here. So, so they have the cream cracker type now, which is actually the softer type. So the first one we mentioned was like, that would have been the tough crackers. This one is the cream crackers type. So you only need about 3 of that. Because why? This one consumes more starch. This one contains more starch than the tough crackers. All right. And you know, you have the salted biscuit. It's telling you that 6 is adequate. If for persons who are Indians or even local persons who may have their roti and dal puri and stuff, you only need a quarter. If it's the roti, And they tell you the different type. The starter type, you need 6. If you're having the roti and the dal puri, they're telling you to do it very thin, and that would require like a quarter. And you said made from 1 cup of flour. So that is actually to kind of limit the amount of starch that you're having in the diet. That is why sometimes some diabetics, some persons with diabetes, they don't even bother to have rice, because rice is one of the highest consumers of starch. It's very high in starch, very high. Even if you eat the wheat rice, the whole wheat, the brown rice, it may not contain as much starch, but it still has a lot of starch. All right, and you know, for your wheat biscuit, it is saying 2 to 2.5 biscuits. So even though it's wheat, it still contains a lot of salt. All right, your Johnny cake, which we know has the bulla, right? It says a quarter bake, right? And that is also made from 1 cup of flour, and that's a small one. Your rye plantain, you only need 1 piece. So when we're having 6, 7, 8 plantains, right? If you're gonna have 2 pieces, so you can actually use a ruler as a guide to have an idea. So if you cut the plantain small, then you can have about 2, because 5 centimeters would actually be at a certain length. So you can probably have about 2 pieces if you're actually measuring it in centimeters.
Okay, Rachel, we have some questions there. Some people are asking, what about bulgur rice when you substitute bulgur for rice?
The bulgur is still not as much starch as the rice, but you still would want to ensure that you're not consuming it on a daily basis. You still not need to eat it every day, because it still do have starch. So you still have to look at the amount, how often you're having that. Otherwise,
how about quinoa?
How about?
Quinoa. It's the rice from the Andes, a little fine, itsy beeny teeny rice, and it looks like cornmeal, like kind of coarse cornmeal.
That one is I think the bulgur rice has about, I think it has a little more starch. That rice has a little more starch still than the bulgur. So the bulgur is still
the quinoa, and the quinoa comes in red. You have red and you have white, and then there is another white one called couscous. That's, I think, from Greece. Couscous.
Oh, I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, couscous. Yeah.
Okay, but if you notice the yam here, they're saying only 1 slice. So we know we have some persons. Well, I am guilty. And because I love yellow yam especially, and I will have like about 3 pieces of yam. So going forward, we have to look at that. All right. So if you're having, say for instance, you can have 1 piece of yam, 1 piece of, and you're supposed to have 4 pieces of carbohydrates. You're supposed to have. So if you're having ground provision, it's supposed to be 4 pieces. So you can have 1 dumpling, 1 banana, 1 piece of yam, and 1 sweet potato. All right. So when you have 2 of each, then you know that you're overeating, and that can actually lead to the chronic diseases. All right. So your legumes here, right? And you have your almonds. So when we eat like a pack of almond, if you notice, all the nuts family, they're actually fatty, they're fatty. So it tells you that you don't need more than 10 almonds, right? For the chickpea, it's saying 1/4 cup. Breadfruit, 2 to 3 seeds. And I think 2 to 3 seeds, you're talking about the peg, because we know that breadfruit is also very high in starch. All right. Your dal, it says medium consistency, you need about 1/2 cup. If you're having dried canned peas, 1/4 cup. Your gungo peas, it should be 1/2 cup. All of these things, you should measure them, because they're actually, the legumes actually has some amount of fat as well to it, and some of them has some amount of starch. And we do know that peanut as well, it has a lot of calories to it, and it can add to your cholesterol level. So when you're eating peanuts, you have to take into consideration. Now, if you have hypertension, I'm not expecting you to be having salted peanuts, because then you would actually be contributing to your blood pressure issues. Remember that anywhere there is salt, then it actually takes water with it. It has a liking for water. And so sometimes you will tend to have the pressure go up. And sometimes if you look, you will notice that your feet is swollen and stuff like that. All right. So most of the persons tend to, with heart failure or kidney disease, they tend to have a lot of swelling, right? Because most of the time these persons are persons with the high blood pressure. Most of them tend to lead to kidney disease or even the diabetics. You know, those conditions actually lead to kidney disease if it's not controlled over time. And sometimes even when it's actually controlled, it depends on how long you have a lot of these diseases, then they do actually cause damage when you have them for a prolonged period of time. Some persons have diabetes for 30 years, 40 years. And even though you would have been controlling it, because of the nature of the disease process, sometimes those persons end up still with circulation problems. So they may tell you that they feel like pins and needles sensation in the feet, you know, or they're not feeling much much sensation to the feet, right? And that is why usually most persons who are diabetic, you can tend to walk on a nail and you don't even feel like you walk on a nail, because over time, the poor circulation has actually damaged the nerve.
Okay, Rachel, a question here. When you mention stewed peas, quarter cup, are you referring to the total amount of peas a person should consume, or the
total
amount of peas to cook with?
The total amount of peas is the same thing. It's the same thing. So remember that when you're consuming it, it's just that you're going to eat it. But this is telling you the preparation phase before you start cooking it.
Oh, so that's what you're to cook
because
with.
if you're eating it, it would be very difficult for you to basically measure how much peas would they use. Yeah. So this is if you're actually preparing it for your basis, that you don't need more than a quarter cup. They have the measuring cups that you use. I mean, if you're having if you're cooking like a larger volume, then that would be different depending on the amount of rice and peas that you're cooking. So if you think that you're actually using a large pot, of course you couldn't use quarter cup of peas because they would get lost. So based on that, you can use that based on the amount, how large the pot is that you're actually using. And it mentions here about cash.
Yeah. How about, because I eat beans and peas a lot for protein. So when you're substituting, like for example, I would cook the quinoa with the with the peas, or the pumpkin or the baked potato, and then I have the peas over it. Quarter cup of peas is not a lot, especially if you love peas.
All right, quarter cup of peas is not a lot, but you have to take into consideration: are you eating the peas with meat, with fish, or with chicken?
No, the peas is the protein.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, because some persons is just like, as I'm telling you now, that's what we're accustomed to, Jamaican dish. A lot of us, if we're not eating our rice and peas and chicken, we don't feel good. But I'm saying there, you would be having the protein, which is the peas, the legumes, right? It's still a form of protein. You would be having the chicken, right? Then you're having carbohydrates. So if you're having the peas and the protein at the same time, that's a double portion of protein that you're consuming, which is not required. So it's either you're having the chicken or you're having the rice and peas, but we get so accustomed to that. So you would have to look at the portion that you're actually consuming. And the portions, it's very important that we look at the portion, because that is what is actually going to help us to determine how healthy we're eating, right? Because if you notice, most of these persons over time that end up with these chronic disorders and stuff, they're just eating anything. And as I said, sometimes some of them are not exercising, a lot of them are not sleeping adequately, a lot of them have a lot of stressors on board. So we have to look at all of these things. But you really should start looking at what you have based on the food groups, and you eliminate. And that is why this is saying that you eliminate or you substitute. So as Dr. Monica Jones is saying that she don't eat the meat, but she has the proteins, which is the peas, which is good enough, right? But it is not safe for you to be having both, or you're having some green peas and then you have a whole bunch of rice here, you know, that you're actually consuming too much calories, and then that is going to have problems later. And some of it is actually increased calories, and some of it is going to actually increase the amount of glucose on board. So you're actually really pushing yourself over to end up with the comorbidities. And I know
Okay,
for
yeah, we have some questions. Sorry. It says, I snack on honey roasted nuts or an Ovaltine biscuits after I finish eating. Is that bad? I hate when they put sugar on any nuts because nuts itself is a good thing. And when they sugar nuts or cereal, I hate that because you don't need sugar on those things. Go ahead.
But the next thing is how soon after you eat you would have been consuming that. Because remember, for some persons that is another diet in itself. And the honey roast peanut is a lot of sugar on it. So even though they tell you that it's honey roasted peanut, I can attest to you most of the time you're not really using honey. They're actually still adding sugar, you know, plus the honey. So you're actually, that's double trouble.
Or they use corn syrup, which are high fructose, which is even worse. That's even worse when they use high fructose.
Right, because those break down faster than the regular glucose. Right. And for diabetic persons, we usually tell them stay away from simple sugars because we know that the simple sugars, they do take a lot of time. They break down easily. So that tend to send up the sugar a lot faster. So we have to be careful with that. But if you're going to eat it like within 4 to 6 hours after a meal, fine, because you would have actually started digesting the first meal. But if you're going to have that then directly after a meal, I think you will be consuming too much. So it's like you basically, remember that the carbohydrates from the food that you will be consuming has glucose to it. The end product of carbohydrates is starch, and starch is glucose in the simplest form. So when you have the honey roasted peanuts, though you're having nuts and beans, the honey roasted on it, you understand that sugar coating is actually sugar there that can actually cause additional problem, especially if you have diabetes. So you have to probably change that. Maybe you can probably have it 4 hours after you would have had your meal. If you're gonna snack on it, say for instance in the night, and you're probably studying and you're gonna snack on that alone, then fine. But you really should see how often you have that. So for instance, you're probably gonna eat it every day. No, that's wrong. You probably can say, all right, I'll eat it probably 3 times for the day. That is good enough, but it shouldn't be directly after your meal. Shouldn't we? And that's what I'm saying to you.
A lot of people, Rachel, finish your meal with something sweet. So probably this is her way of having something sweet and thinking that if it's honey roasted nuts,
it's not safe.
Honey roasted is never, anytime they put honey on the nuts, it's not good. You eat the nuts by itself. You don't need no honey on any cashew or almond, or you don't need those things on them.
And even when it says the salted peanut, and that's why I said for persons who has hypertension, you know, and would be on a low sodium diet, then you would need to be having salty peanut. If you have the raw peanut, those would actually be better for you, right? So you have to look at that going forward. It's very important. As I said, that is why sometimes eating out is so unhealthy, because when you go there, they have the sheets, right? And then you have, after you have your meal, then they tell you, okay, appetizer, right? And you have the dessert, right? And for some of us, depends on the soup that you order, right? For instance, it's a vegetarian soup. That vegetarian soup in itself might have a lot of starch in it. Depends on the type of plant-based product that they use, right? Some of it depends, may have like a cellulose form of carbohydrates, which is not bad, because the cellulose is actually not amounting to as much sugar as you would have for the regular glucose that is broken down from the plant base, right? And then when you go ahead now, and after you don't have this big gulp of rice, or they give you the rolls, plus you're gonna get the rice, then afterwards you get a serving of cake. You see how you're actually consuming an amount, so many calories there, which is not safe. So even though they may give you like a 1 scoop of rice, and you're saying, oh, I just got a 1 scoop of rice, but you're still gonna have the cake, right? You still would have had probably 2 garlics bread before, right? So it's really not safe. So going forward, we have to look at some of these things and the way we eat.
Another question, what dessert you recommend after meals? Some people like to finish their meal with something sweet.
Well, as I mentioned before, I would think if you had rice and you're going to have desserts, you're actually over consuming carbohydrates there, and you're actually over consuming calories. So it depends on how soon after meal you're going to have that dessert. Because remember, when you eat a meal, as I mentioned, the body, you have the stage of digestion that it goes through. All right. And then you still have to think about the amount of time that it takes to digest your food. Right. So if you have a serving of rice already, as I mentioned, plus you have the bread, all of that is actually the end product of that is starch. And you're going to have a sweet cake again, right? That is starch there plus sugar. And the rice already broken down, the end product of that is glucose. So it is best, well, they said it's always best to have the fruits before, because what happens is that the fruits actually has as it has it's not hormone, it has a chemical in it that is better coated for the stomach before you have the meal. So it's always better to eat the fruits before the meal. All right. But if you're going to have say, for instance, a dessert, I don't even know which one to recommend right now, because I don't think a cake would be good enough. It's probably gonna be too sweet, unless you're probably gonna have one of those. You have some cakes that are not too sweet, like not the banana. Some persons make the banana bread and it's not very sweet. So it depends on if you're gonna be the one that is actually preparing some desserts, then it's fine. If you know you can bake and you're not using a lot of sugar, then it's fine. But if it's something that you're gonna buy from outside, most of those things are actually stocked with sugars. They're stacked with a lot of sugar, and it's not really safe. So,
all right, so we
and
have
if you
some
think you need,
questions here. We have some questions.
Mhm.
What about what we do normally if we go out in a group? If we go out in a group and we're going to have dessert, we share the calories. Everybody take a piece of the cake. No one person is going to
Right.
eat all that. We have one piece of cake, and everybody, if it's 6, 5, no matter, everybody have a piece. So no one person have, you have a slice of cake, I have a slice of cake, you have ice cream. We don't do that. We just order like one slice of cake, and then everybody eat from that. Get your different spoon, get your different plate, and everybody eat from that one slice. Okay, there are some questions here. Somebody's saying that they eat yogurt after the meal, but yogurt is protein. And another is saying, in terms of piece size, if you're cooking for 4, how much peas would you use for 4 people? Would that be a 1/4 cup times 4?
Yes.
So that
And
would
as
be
I
a
said,
1/4 cup
it's
times
a
4.
1/4 cup times 4, but depending on the amount of rice that you're using too.
Yes.
So here you would have to use your discretion, because it can be 4 person, but you have some persons say they don't like to eat a little bit of food, and you'll find them cooking a big pot of rice. So you have to use your discretion where that one is concerned. As for the first person that was asking about the dessert though, if you think you need to have something sweet, as again, you have to look at the portion. So as opposed you would actually consume one whole, say, Johnny cake, you can probably just take a 1/4 of that for the dessert. So you wouldn't be consuming too much sweets. Probably then later on, probably like 4 hours later or 3 to 4 hours, you can probably have another piece. But really and truly, you should not be consuming so much sweets for the day.
And the yogurt, which is another form of protein.
The yogurt is, that's why some persons will have yogurt for a meal by itself, because yogurt actually has a lot of calories and a lot of other nutritional additives to it than just the protein. So further down in my presentation, you will see what is required for the yogurt.
All right, I have
And
2 more questions. What about keto ice cream? And people want to know about basmati rice. Basmati is what from India. That's the one they use most. A lot of diabetics use that because it has less starch, but it does.
It has less starch, but it still has a lot of starch.
It still have a lot of starch. And someone is asking.
They have rice that is designed for diabetics only, that it has way less starch, but it's not as tasty. But some supermarkets here does have it.
Yes. And they're asking the difference between parboiled rice and white rice, if there is a difference in the in the amount
Yes,
of calories.
the parboil, they mention, as the name suggests, parboil, because it's actually less starch. It's like they basically, how they present it, they deal with it. It's like it would have actually been pre-cooked sort of way, so you would have actually gotten rid of some of the starch than the regular rice. So yes, it is actually lower in starch.
Yes, so what about the keto ice cream now? You know, they are always have these diet fat keto ice cream.
I don't know about keto and ice cream, but I've never heard of it. But
Yeah,
as the name suggests, though, I know that I would assume that it is actually lower in sugar than the regular ice cream.
yes, it is. And if you want to get like the plant-based stuff here in the US, you can go to like Whole Foods or the Nutrition Depot where they sell these things. It just costs a little more because you can get like a half a pint of regular ice cream or the sugar-free ice cream. And sugar-free ice cream mean you have more fat. That's not what that means. They put more fat in it to make up for the lack of sugar. But you can get a half a pint for like $6 plus. But when you get a little quarter pint of like cashew ice cream or ice cream made with cashew milk or almond milk, you get a little quart, just like 1 or 2 serving for $6 something. So the more nourishing one always costs a lot more, because you can get a lot of these things in plant-based, but sugar-free ice cream have more fat content. That's what they use to balance out the flavors. So you're going to have less of one and more of the other. But you do have a lot of these things in plant-based. It just costs an arm and a leg to get like the plant-based chicken substitute, the plant-based, everything, basically jerky. You can get them in plant-based. It just costs a lot of money. I don't know if they have them in Jamaica, but here they have them plant-based.
Yes, we do, but they're expensive, as you
They're
say.
very expensive.
But if you notice here that they mentioned that the dark leafy vegetables here, they're actually lower in calories. So what you can start doing though, like for persons like, a lot of us are guilty, so we'll have this big plate of rice. You can probably just like have 1 cup of rice. You can actually use a cup and you scoop out the rice, so you know that you're not consuming too much. Because remember that even though the vegetable has calories as well, it's low calories, but it still has a lot of calories. So if you notice, it says here, vegetables such as those listed in the group may, if it is raw, right, it does not, or sometimes if it's not desired, because sometimes when you actually cook the vegetables, you're actually damaging the protein. You actually denature the protein, so you actually lose some of the nutrients. So if you're actually cooking vegetables, you're not supposed to be cooking it for too long, right? But it says here, when you actually use most of them here, they do not have much energy, right? And when you cook, you use only 1 cup. You may also use these vegetables at each meal in addition to your vegetable allowance. So it depends on, as I said, usually when you're actually seeing a dietitian, they would actually tell you the portions of vegetable that you need to have, and as opposed to how much rice, because all of these are dependent on, as I mentioned before, your age, your condition that you have, your weight, your eyes, all of these things they have to take into consideration. But you can start eating differently. So instead of having 3-4 spoons of rice, big spoons of rice, you can just take out a small cup and you have that there. You can probably have a slice of banana with it, right? And the banana is not as high in starch as the yam. The yam is very high in starch. And then you can have your servings of vegetables along with your protein. Or if you don't want to eat the meat, you can have an extra portion of your stock meats, your peas and your beans as the protein. So now remember that if you're having peas and beans, right, to substitute for your protein, then you still have to look at the portions, because the portions will determine how much you need to consume that would actually substitute for the chicken. All right, so you can't eat only 6 beans and expect to get the amount of protein that you would get from 1 chicken leg. You would have to eat far more beans than that to get the amount that you would require if you're actually eating food from animals type of protein. All right, and this is actually in addition to what I've said. These are additional vegetables that you can use. All right. Again, these are additional your spinach, your tomato, and tomato too is also a good source of vitamin C. A lot of persons are not aware of that, but tomato is actually rich in vitamin C. Now we're at our fruits. So you have your beetroot. So it says for the beetroot, you can have a half cup. Some of these food, I don't even know them. Your carrots, your choy mein, and it is saying your Chinese vegetable. That's what the Chinese use. Mixed vegetables canned. You only need a half cup. So when we're some persons using all two mixed vegetables, remember that the mixed vegetables, it has the green peas in it, which is carbohydrates. It has the corn in it, which is carbohydrates. So if you look at whatever you're preparing, then this can actually help you as a guide. So that is why I think they're telling you the portions that you need to have. So I'm sure a half a cup of the vegetable would be far less than you using an entire tin, which would make you be eating healthier than just having one whole tin of green peas or one whole tin of mixed vegetables. And you have your onion, and we know onion is actually a good source of antioxidants as well. So those actually helps to prevent cancer cells as well. And you have your pumpkin, tells you a half cup, your string beans, a half cup, and your turnip. And turnip as well do have some amount of starch. And that is why if you notice, they're telling you the measures here, they didn't say 1 cup, they said half cup, because even though these are fruits, you know, they still have some amount of starch and other additives to it. Now we have grapefruit here, grape juice, orange juice. Now we know for some persons with acidic stomach, you know, say for instance, they might have what you call it now, some persons with GERD or persons with stomach ulcer especially, then you would not want to consume too much citrus-based products. For the grapefruit, I can tell you that grapefruit is contraindicated with a lot of medication that persons take. And so sometimes if you notice persons who has hypertension, for some of those, they will label it, the pharmacist will label it, do not take this item if you're drinking grapefruit. It's very important, right? Because it actually inhibits, it works against the efficacy of the drug. All right, and these are other fresh fruits now. So the first type of fruits were citrus. Now these are other fruits. And you were taught that anything with seed is considered as a fruit. So they say tomato is a fruit. And that is why here they're saying cashew and a fruit. But you know, you have the fruit part of the cashew. I think they say they call it cashew banana. So I guess that's why they have here fruits.
Yes.
Right, and they tell you how much you need. So for guineps, when we eating, when you have a whole lot of guineps and you have in a bunch with 20 and 30 piece, 30 guineps, that is not always, well, I am guilty of that. That is not safe. If you notice, when you eat guineps, sometimes your stomach feels heavy, like you start having a burning in your stomach, because sometimes it leaves a lot of phlegm on the stomach. So if you notice here, they're telling you to eat 10 cherries, 20. Now cherries is one of that fruit also has a lot, it's very rich in vitamin C, very rich in vitamin C. So that is also good. And you know, your coconut water has a lot of potassium in it. So for persons who are actually having diarrhea, that is why we normally say drink the coconut water. It's not that it's actually going to stop the diarrhea, but usually when persons are having diarrhea, you do lose potassium from your feces and you lose sodium when you vomit. So that's why if you're actually vomiting, you can actually get the Gatorade if you're not hypertensive, because you would be losing sodium. So the Gatorade will replace you. But if you're actually having diarrhea, then the potassium from the coconut water will actually replace the potassium that you're losing. And we did mention yesterday that potassium is one of the vital ion that is responsible for the contractility of the heart. So you do need your sodium. And if you notice, sometimes when you start feeling so weak, if you're having diarrhea and you start feeling so weak, then you notice that your heart will be beating a little faster. And if you feel the pulse are usually a little more rapid. And sometimes when persons are dehydrated, that's how we know. We look at their pulse. When we're in ICU and we see somebody pulse going up, we said, okay, if we cannot find the indication, most of the times we can look at their fluid level. And once we actually give them a bolus of fluid, then we notice that the heart rate start trending down. That's because they were actually dry or they were dehydrated. So we give them fluids to replace that. Because now it is telling you if somebody's dehydrated, then most of the times they're actually having a reduction in water, but they're actually retaining the salt, right? So they're actually increasing their heart rate. And for the mango, for persons who have diabetes, if you notice it says here, mango ripe, one small. So for all of us with the 3 and the 4 mangoes,
who sit with a bowl of mangoes, a bowl of
and
different mangoes.
you know, God know exactly what he's doing, why some of these fruits are seasonal, because if you were supposed to have them right throughout the year, I'm sure the hospital would not be able to contain all of these people. And I'm not sure if persons know, but papaya is actually a natural form of contraceptive. And in the past, studies would have shown that the green papaya was very good at actually healing wounds. So in the hospital, we used to have persons grate the papaya and take it in and we use it to dress the wound. But over time, you know, in terms of infection prevention protocols, we would have stopped that because in terms of the preparation, we know maybe, you know, it wouldn't have actually been done under sterile conditions. But yes, papaya is a natural contraceptive. All right, so here we continue. We have our raw pineapple. You have your pineapple juice and they're telling you 1/3 cup. For the pineapple, it says 1 slice and it tells you 1.5 to 2 centimeters thick. So for all of us who sit down and have 3, 4, 5 pineapple per day or 2 pineapples or 1 pineapple. And if you notice, this is with each serving of food. So for instance, if you're actually gonna eat at 6 a.m. in the morning, then you're supposed to be having 1 slice, right? Then if you're going to eat, probably say for between 10 and midday again, then you can have another slice, but you're really not supposed to be having, you know, 4 and 5 slices at once because you're actually, remember that from the fruits, you do have fructose, right? Natural fructose, which is actually sweet again. So by you're not like getting a lot of glucose, but you're getting fructose and it's still a form of sugar that can actually increase your sugar level. All right, so you have your naseberry, your soursop, and it's telling you 1/2 to 1/4 cup of soursop and your soursop juice. So it's 1/3. So when we're there drinking 4 or 5 cups of juice, we're actually damaging ourselves because we know that a lot of these juices we would have been adding sugar, right? So the amount of juices, the amount of cups that you consume will actually determine how many sugars you're actually consuming per day. So you have to look at that as well in terms of your measurements. And it says star apple, you need a medium or a small one. Your sweet sop, 1 small one. Watermelon, 1 cup cubed. All right, so it depends on your size cup, but the watermelon is actually one of the safer fruit to have. All right. As we mentioned though, everything has its do's and its don'ts because sometimes you have persons with heart failure, you still would have to limit the amount of melon because as it says watermelon, it does have a lot of water and it can actually contribute to the amount of fluids the person is getting on board. And for persons who are having heart failure, their heart would have actually been overloaded already with fluid. So you don't want to push them over. So those patients, you have to actually look at the amount of water that they're drinking or any fruit that actually has water base. You still would have to limit that as well. And here mention imported fresh food. So you have your apple, your grapes, and your pears. And again, it's telling you the amount of grapes, 14 medium, your apples, 1/2 medium or 1 small, and your pear. And remember that we mentioned that the foreign apple, it does have some amount of starch and you can actually taste that when you're actually eating it. So you have to look at the amount that you consume. All right. Your canned fruits now, you have your apricots, your fruit cocktail. So for the apricot, you can have 2 halves, grapefruit segments up to 5, your pears, 2 halves, fruit cocktail, 2 halves, and the grapefruit segment, you can have 1/3. I think there is something missing from here. One is grapefruit segment. I think one of them is extracted. So you have 1 ring or 1/3 cup pieces. All right, and then we continue. These are dried fruits now, where you have your dates, your fig, your dry fig, you have your prunes, and you have your raisins. And we do know that prunes too are actually one of the classic fruits that we can use for persons who are actually having constipation. That is one of the natural remedy that you can use. So of course, if you're actually using the prune, the natural prune, or you're making the prune juice and you're not getting a bowel action, then it depends on how long you're not having that for, then there should be some form of concern, because we did mention yesterday about the effects of constipation on the bowel when you are actually experiencing that for too long, and it can actually cause you to have hemorrhoids or tear in the bowel because you're now forcing to pass that feces when you actually feel the need to go. All right, so now for your chicken, and this is now your food from animals. So you see what I was telling you about now, the chicken, 1 small drumstick. So not a leg and a thigh and a piece of breast at once.
Quarter chicken, quarter chicken. Quarter.
The chicken breast,
Quarter.
the chicken breast, it says 2 slices. And the chicken breast is one of the safer parts of the meat to eat, because it doesn't have as much fat. It doesn't have fat. That's the part that doesn't really have any fat to it. It says the chicken wing, 1 small, chicken neck, 2 small. If you're having your ham, so for those of us who like to have 5, 6, and 7 pieces of ham, it is saying that you really should have a 5 centimeter by 7.5. So that should be the size of your ham. So if you're actually looking at a ruler, you should estimate how much ham you should eat at 1 serving with your meal for the Christmas. All right, so that in January now, you're not suffering from obesity and all of these cardiovascular illnesses. All right, for the rabbit, right, it says thin slices, or the game meat is 4 small cubes or 30 grams cooked. The liver, 3.5 centimeters by 5 centimeters by 1.5 centimeters. And it says that you should max the box size. So you know, sometimes we cut the liver into boxes, or when it's through, it actually looks like it's in box format. So that is how small it should really be. Your kidneys, it says that the kidney should be 1 tablespoon. So not a whole dish of kidneys, because remember, these are red meat, and actually these two can actually increase the amount of calories that we're consuming. Now, this is saying now your lean meat cheese. So your cottage cheese, you only need 2 tablespoons. All right, so it's best you actually cut up the cheese so you can measure it. For the grated Parmesan cheese, you need 2 tablespoons as well. Now here you have your medium fat meat and poultry. So you may have your goat. So for those of us who like our curry goat, where did this come from? My stuff. All right, so for your curry goat, I think I might have passed that one. Right, and it says boneless, you need 1 tablespoon or 4 small cubes. That's impossible for me if I love curry goat. And your beef, so if it's actually trimmed, or it says your regular slice, it should be thin, 6.5 centimeters by 7.5 centimeters, or an estimated of 30 grams. All right. If you're actually stewing the beef, it's supposed to be 4 small cubes. Now, if you think you want to go back a second time after you would have started digesting after 4 hours, fine. But the thing that actually damages us the amount is the portion size is our problem. We're not eating in the correct portion. We always eat this large gulp of food, right? And then our body not able to digest it all at once. So all of that sugar glucose is just there floating around, especially if we have diabetes and it is not getting into the cells. So if we're going to have small frequent meals, then that is good enough for us to have. If you're having your pork chops, right? It says that it's always good to trim the fat, right? And it says a half small. And we have some persons who really like the fatty part of the pork. That is really not healthy for us at all, because that is the part that consumes the highest amount of fat, that has the highest amount of fat, contains the highest amount of fat. Now for your medium fat fish, right? And these are canned and drained. Your tuna fish, your salmon or your mackerel, it says a 1/4 cup. If you're having your sardine, you have 1 large or 2 small, right? And this is same with the oil drain, because we do know that the oil in itself does have fat in it, right? If you notice, it is very oily. So anything that has oil, it's always contributing to the amount of fat that you're actually consuming. Now for the egg, it says, you notice it didn't say 2 or 3 eggs. It says 1 egg, whole, a medium size. Now egg is 1 meal, but egg is one of the only food that has all the nutrients that we need. However, egg is very, very, very high in calories. That yellow part is very high in calories. So when we're eating 3 and 4 eggs at one sitting, even 2, it's not safe. All right, so we really should try and have eggs like probably 3 times for the week, you know, and we need to stop having like 2 and 3 eggs. And for some persons, you know, you can get boils from it because you're actually having too much egg at the same time. Remember that egg has proteins, it has calcium, it has, as I tell you, it's one food, but it has just about every single nutrient you can think of, right? The white part is healthier to eat because the yellow part is actually stocked with fats and cholesterols and all of those things. So you have to look at the amount of eggs that you're eating per day. And even if you're having it once per day, then you should not go more than 3 times for the week. All right, so now these are high fat food, mutton or lamb, and it says you trim, so it says 1 teaspoon or 4 small cubes. If you're having a chicken wing, it says a small, 1 small. All right, because those can be, if you notice the chicken wing, that part there is, it's kind of fatty. And it's not like the thigh where you can cut it off for the chicken wing. It's just the fat that surrounds it and the bone that is inside. So it's really not possible for you to really cut it. But that part, that fatty part there, you know, has a lot of fat, and that is why they're saying here that it is high fat. So those are high fat diet. For the chicken leg, that is something that you can trim and cut off the fat as well. So with that one, you don't get as much sugar. Here again, it tells you that the pork is high fat. Your pork spare ribs, your beef, your minced beef, sausage, the luncheon meat, that thin luncheon meat, that is very salty as well. So you have to be careful how much of that you're actually, and if you notice here, it says 1 slice, because one of that slice of luncheon is very salty. It has a lot of fat. It has a lot of carbohydrates. So you're actually consuming too many. And for some of us who are actually having the bologna and we're having like 5, 6 slices or 3 slices, that too, it's saying 1 slice here. So when you have like 2 or 3, you're actually consuming too much fat. Because if you notice already, it's under the high fat meal section. So you don't want to have more than 1 slice. And here it mentions salt meats, 5 centimeters times 7.5 centimeters. And salt meat in itself, it's not for persons who are on low sodium diet, because that would be contraindicating against your condition. Then you have salami, 2 slices, because we do know that the salami is actually, it has a lower sodium base than the bologna. That's why they tell you two thin slices here. For your oxtail, 1 piece. Oxtail is very, very, very high in calories. So 1 piece. Pigtail, 1 small piece. So for those of us who like the plate filled with the pigtail, it's not safe. The pig trotters, 2 small pieces. The lamb chop, 1 small piece. And if you have the sliced lamb thin, then it says 6.5 by 7.5. Now for your cheese now, they're telling you about the high fat cheese. So you have the cheddar, right, which is the American type. This is like supposed to be 1.25 centimeters cube. So not the 3 slices of cheese with just one small bun that you're actually overeating a lot of. And cheese is very high in fat. Yes, it has the calcium, but it do has a lot of fat as well. So for persons who are actually sinusitis, then you should really try to have little or not so much of those things in your diet. And Dr. Monica Jones can attest to that. All right. So your milk, your skim and very low fat milk. So we know that when you skim the milk, it is actually, the skim milk is actually safer because you would have actually, when they skim the milk, you're getting rid of those added fat that is there. So the skim milk is actually safer, and you're saying a half cup is good. Or if you're actually having the powder milk, that is before you had the liquid, you need 2 teaspoons. For the yogurt, it says plain low fat, so you need 60 grams or 2 ounces. All right. For the low fat milk, right, the 2% milk, that is actually the safer one, and it says you need a half cup. Yogurt made with 2% milk, you still need about 60 grams because it is actually low fat. And for your cow's milk, oh boy, I don't know if I can drink half cup of milk, but this is saying a half cup. And for your milk, if it's actually the evaporated before you had the liquid, then you would need quarter cup. If you're actually having the powdered whole milk before you had the liquid, you still would need 2 tablespoons. Now, if it's the yogurt, which is actually the plain whole milk type, it's still 60 grams, which would actually work out to about 2 ounces. Now, this is the fats and oil section. So if you notice that I've actually spoke about all the food groups, but I've actually broken it down into the various groups. So the fats and oil, food from animals, your legumes, your carbohydrates, your proteins. All right, so the margarine, it says 1 teaspoon. Some of us fill the spoon like 2, 3, and it's a big spoon because we want the rice to taste nice. So it has to have a lot of butter, but we're actually doing some damage here to ourselves. Now, avocado, I'm not sure if a lot of person know that avocado is very, 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 very high in cholesterol. Yes. So when you're actually having 3 and 4 and 5 slices of pear, it's not safe. And as I said, boy, God really knows what he's doing when he has a lot of these things that are seasonal, because if we were supposed to get that right throughout the year, a lot of us would be in problems. All right, so ackee here, it says Jamaican because I'm not sure if you know that in Barbados, ackee has a different meaning. I think it's some form of some curse words. So I think they did state this here Jamaican to see what, and they said 2 seeds.
How is that possible? How could you be a Jamaican and eat 2 seeds of ackee?
So that's 6 pieces.
Don't you see? How can you be a Jamaican and have 2 seeds of ackee? That's very un-Jamaican and unpatriotic.
Oh my God.
Impossible, right, Sadie? Impossible. You have to have what? A good cup of ackee and saltfish. People eat ackee and saltfish. I like a cup of ackee and saltfish. 2 seeds.
Oh my. When I was actually preparing this, I said, oh, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, 2 seeds.
And for the peanuts,
2 seeds of ackee. I mean,
and look at the peanut butter. It says 1 teaspoon. So for all of us who's gonna put 3 and 4 teaspoons on the bread, that's a no-no. And it says for the green olives, you need 5. For the almonds, dry and roasted, you just need 6 whole. I had a bag of almond.
Exactly. That's how I eat the bags. I don't know what they're talking 6. You can't eat 6 almond.
So this is oil here, and you know we have corn oil, we have cottonseed oil, we have sunflower oil, we have olive oil. The olive oil too is one of the safer oil to use. But with the olive oil, you're not able to fry with it. It's not good to fry, but it's actually one of the safer oils, better than all the others here because it's actually lower in cholesterol.
But Rachel, you're in trouble because someone is stopped paying attention because you said 1 piece of oxtail. How can they recover from 1 piece of oxtail? This is and Christmas, and you said 1 piece of oxtail.
This is actually a guide that we got from the Ministry of Health. So, you know, that is what they use to. So.
All right. But you know, you have coconut oil and you have grapeseed oil, you have walnut oil. I use all walnut oils,
They have a lot of
avocado
them.
oil, which is very high in cholesterol.
Yeah.
Avocado oil.
I think you have flaxseed as well. Flaxseed.
Flaxseed. So
There's
you
a
have
lot of them.
it depends on what you can get. Coconut
Yeah.
oil. And I prefer that they're calling organic coconut oil. I don't trust anything they say organic. I make my own coconut oil.
Right, and that's the safer one. That's the safer one. But
Yes,
once upon a time, we thought that was the safer oil to use, but then now we found out that the olive oil is much healthier than the coconut oil, because the coconut oil still has a lot of calories to cholesterol levels to it. So the olive oil is still much safer than it. And it mentions here salad dressing, you need to use 1 tablespoon. And if it's salad dressing with reduced calorie, then you can use 2 tablespoons. So of course here, you're actually concerned about your calories, because we know what having too much calories can actually amount to. Now, if we notice here for the saturated fats, which are these are the bad fats. So we have our butter, our lard, our shortening, and our ghee. These you don't need more than 1 teaspoon for all of them, because for saturated fats, that is the one that is actually a contributor of heart disease. All right, so now for the ones that a lot of people like continuing, bacon, so the streaky bacon, or the chicken fat, the pork, salted pork, cream cheese, all of these. If you notice the streaky bacon, they said a small ratio that is actually just one peg of it. They don't want you to have, because it's very high in cholesterol. If you notice when you fry the bacon, just look at the oil, right? The chicken fat, 1 teaspoon. Cream cheese, you need 1 tablespoon of that. For the coffee whitener powder, 4 teaspoons is fine. And here it's telling you about the coconut oil and the palm oil. It says 1 teaspoon. I think that is ridiculous, but if it's the dried coconut or it's grated, then you can have 2 teaspoons, because with the dry ones, you would have actually gotten rid of most of the extracted oils. So that one you can use a little more than the 1 teaspoon. And now this is an important notice. So it says if 2 or more portions are eaten, these food would contribute significantly to contribute a significant quantity of sodium, which is the same as salty foods, and should be restricted for those on low sodium diets. So again, this would actually be relevant for persons who have high blood pressure, right? You would definitely need to pay attention to the portion size that is here, because most of these food are actually high in sodium as well. So what we need to start doing when we go to the supermarkets or anything that we're eating, but for the stuff that we can measure the amount of calories that we're consuming per day, then you basically look at that, because if you notice, it will tell you based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you're supposed to eat each meal and you're actually picking up something, then you can measure from what each packet or what you're preparing, how much calories each of them contains. And that will help you to better measure the amount of calories that you're consuming per day. As I said, the maximum is 1,800, right? It can be more for persons. It depends on how slim you are, or if you're somebody who is actually very physically active, then you will require more calories, because you're going to burn the calories. You have some persons who eat a lot and they never get fat, because those are persons who tend to burn a lot of calories. However, even though they're burning a lot of calories, it depends on the amount of the type of food that they're eating. So while they might be burning calories, they might be consuming too much fats. So that is usually a problem. And that is why we mentioned that some very slim people usually still suffer a heart attack or a stroke, because even though they're slim, but they would have actually consumed too many fatty foods, and that would actually block the arteries and actually limit the blood flow. And so over time now that they tend to get high blood pressure, or they actually get a stroke, because there is a clot formation from the thrombus there, because the passage is too small for the blood to flow. All right, so I hope this presentation will help us to eat a little more healthier for the holidays.
I think we need to pray right now. We need to pray. Because some people are saying no eating this Christmas with one piece of oxtail and one piece of goat meat, and that is impossible for them to have one piece. So we need to pray. Oh, either we're gonna bind the calories or rebuke the calories or tell the calories not to come in the body. But we need to do something, because these portions are 2 seeds of
too small.
2 seeds of Akis. These are
It's ridiculous.
yes. So what we can do though, seriously, is moderation. Everything in moderation, because if you want to sample everything, just don't have a whack of everything.
It's a portion size,
a little bit of everything, a little bit of the curry goat, a little bit of the oxtail. Okay, I'm not gonna eat the chicken wings. I'm gonna have a piece of the chest, and then make sure you have a lot of vegetables, and then you can say, okay, I eat rice and peas all the time. Let me just have a piece of mac and cheese or a baked potato. You understand? But if you have small portions of everything instead of a big whack, and then pack the plate up high and sit and eat that off, and then go back and say, okay, you make your belch. So when you belch now, you make space, you go back now the second time to go and get the second plate. And if you go from house to house on Christmas Day, it takes at least 4 hours for your body to digest a lot of the food. And when you eat a lot of cheese and fatty foods, it could be more, depending on your metabolism. And if your metabolism is fast, then you can eat quicker. But if it is slow, and the older you get, it slows down, it may take you a longer period of time before you can eat again. So when you eat, that is how you put on weight. And we did not mention the rum cake. And you know you're going to eat the rum cake. And you know you're going to drink the sorrel. So let's talk about
the rum cake in itself is a lot. Remember that alcohol is one of the highest contributor of fat. So
and it has butter,
rum cake,
it has butter and flour and a whole lot of eggs
sugar.
And the sugar. And the rum cut out the sugar so you don't taste it so well, but it's a lot of sugar in it. And remember, you're going to eat all these things. Somebody say yes to the rum cake and sorrel. So if you know you're going to eat a lot, space yourself out. Don't get up and have a breakfast with 2 eggs as an omelet. You know you're going to eat a whack. So I have the fruits, and it's always best, because I do this in the morning. The first thing I eat in the morning is the fruits, because it's better for your body to eat the fruits first. So I get up in the morning, and the first thing I have is the fruits, and then a hot fluid. And remember, we said, if you're going to eat all these foods now, you know you're going to need to poop. You know you need to void. You need to evacuate, to defecate. You need to get these things now out of your body. And one thing you can do to assist yourself, have tea. Have some tea in there, because the tea will melt the fat and allow the fat to pass through your body than drinking something cold. And the cold now hang on to the fat. Just like when you have the fat in the plate, you have to boil the water or turn on the hot water to melt the fat. Have a cup of tea like they do in England. Just drink the tea to try get some of it out of you. And then after you have eaten, go and exercise, go for a walk. Go for a walk and try to use up the
energy,
calories,
all of
and
that
burn
energy,
it and burn it up. Say, okay, I eat 5 pieces of oxtail and 5 pieces of goat meat. I'm going to go walk, and you walk around the block before you even go and eat another second plate. Walk around the block. Amen. Honey,
because sometimes they might not get that time to eat, because when niggeritis start kicking and they just fall asleep right there, because the sugar level is now too high.
The sugar level.
I think Mr. Lynette was asking if she could use honey to sweeten her sorrel. Yes, and we did mention yesterday about the benefits of honey. It has a lot of benefits to it, so it's actually healthier than the regular sugar, which is actually packed with.
And it is a natural sedative. So it regulates your mood, but it can put you to sleep as well when you use honey, because it's a natural sedative. Amen. So I hope you all won't be too upset with your portion. Make sure portion, 2 seeds.
Dr. Monica, here
Just
in Jamaica, what we have right now, I don't know if you realize the health minister was saying that no hospital for some persons if it's not, because what happened is that these young people, they give grandma the cake, and they send up the sugar and they carry them to dump them in the hospital so they can party for the holidays. And then after now the holidays, they come back and they come for grandma. So we're accustomed to that, and we know that is the trend. So even the minister was actually, speaking out
they're not gonna
against.
take no grandmothers. All right, so I hope you all enjoy that, and it's just to help us, amen, because we don't want to be joining the prayer line in January for healing and deliverance from cardiovascular disease, but we want to enjoy yourself and have fun. But if you know who you are, you know what I do a lot of times? I have the vegetable and the protein. If just have the vegetable. You can eat rice all the time. I don't eat rice a lot. I eat quinoa and baked potato, but have the vegetable, and then you can say, okay, because I don't normally eat goat meat, but if there's a celebration, I can eat it, because I sometimes I'm tired of the fish, so I will eat some, but then don't eat the chicken, and then don't eat the this, and then don't eat the that. Amen.
And then you know what, Dr. Jones, as a prophetess was saying, that some of us eat too much. I think if we develop the discipline from following this guide that we saw here today, a lot of us will now get into the habit of actually breaking ourselves to fast. Because some of us, we want results, and we will just say, oh, I can only do the 6 to 12 fast, because we're so setting on the food.
The eating,
so we and if you want bigger results, then you have to fast for longer. It's more sacrifice that you have to do. So you have to use this as a guide so you can better able to develop that discipline, right? To help you in your spiritual growth as well. So,
amen. All right. So remember, on Thursday, we're going to have Pastor Dylan. We're going to be doing grief counseling part 2, and she's a mental health counselor. So we're going to be looking at depression and those that are sad during this time, but we're going to go more on the mental part of it, because she's a mental health counselor. And Keisha, if you could share the Call Out Gospel Radio flyer. We're having Monica Jones Ministries. We're having toys and fun day for the children in Ocho Rios with Call Out Gospel Radio. So they're going to be doing it. It is this Friday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Amen. And they're going to be handing out toys, and they're going to do, I think, cake and ice cream, but it's going to be a fun day for the children. Last year, I bought the things and shipped it down. This year, I'm smarter. I send the money and you go and buy it. It's easier on me, but we're having it. We did it last year. We're doing it again this year. Amen. So stop by, go if you're in the Ocho Rios area, and support them. Amen. But they're going to be having a fun day for the children, and they'll be handing out gifts. Amen. So God bless you. And remember, just eat healthy, stay healthy. We want to all cross over into 2023 together, and we want to be alive, and we want to be healthy. Amen. There was the CPC pastor named Pastor Jolly, and he was way overweight, and he would eat all the food he's not supposed to eat. And he said, I bind these calories in the name of Jesus. In the name of Jesus, you can't conquer me. You can't conquer me. I rebuke you. It don't work that way. You cannot rebuke the calories. Just close your mouth sometimes and stop rebuking the calories. Amen. Or he would say, I'm in the battle with the anorexia demon, and I'm winning. That demon not going to conquer me. I'm more than a conqueror. I'm going to conquer the demon. It's not no anorexia demon. It's your mouth. Keep your mouth closed and live longer. God bless you all. See you all next week. This Thursday and next week Thursday, because Monday and Tuesday is going to be celebrated as Christmas and Boxing Day, so we're going to be closed. Amen. I'll put that flyer up over the weekend, but see you on Thursday. And if you know people are struggling and bereaved in December, tell them to come on and they can talk to Pastor Dylan as we look at mental health. and wellness during this holiday. Thank you so much, Rachel. That was not just only informative, it was funny with the 2 scenes of Aki and Lamar is so upset. She said she don't care anymore because you said one piece of oxtail and she can't get over it. Amen. But God bless her. We forgive you. She's going to get over it and she's going to love you anyhow.
Amen.
God bless you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. See you on Thursday, everyone. Bye-bye.